Late Night Thoughts with the incorrigible Mr. Zavo. Today's episode is brought to you by the verb exacerbate. Get your mind out of the gutter. From the mid-17th century Latin form exacerbat, made harsh from the verb exacerbare, ex expressing inducement of state, plus acerbus, harsh or bitter. Hello and namaste. Welcome to the show on a Thursday, December 10th at 3:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Late Night Thoughts. The special recorded live segment. Almost all my segments are recorded live, except for the few that are not. But this segment is called what it is called because it's literally in the middle of the night for me, and I'm up having thoughts of the thinky thought variety. That opening track was titled Eastern Horizons Beckon Me. There's a typo. It says bacon. I'm glad I didn't read it as that. The infamously animatronic DJ Zed spinning loops of digital sounds into that track based on the Oriental Flavor 101 Remix pack on Remix Live app, which as of yesterday, I would have given you a 5-star, double thumbs up, whatever best rating thing you like, widgety thing, best personal real life unpaid endorsement recommendation. Like if you're on, I think it's available on my not iPhone. What is this? The LG something LG 6 or 7. I don't know. No one pays me for this shit. So if I mention a product, it's just because it's functionally, pragmatically, literally the product I'm using, and it's not about product placement. I swear to God. I wish I was riddled with product placement endorsements. That'd be awesome. But then I'd be a big fucking sellout. Welcome to the show, folks. So I woke up twice thinking it was tomorrow, and it wasn't even like quite that yet. And I think the second and or third time, because my memory's a bit hazy on the subject, because I may have just dreamt about waking up. I don't know, that happens sometimes. But what on appears to be the third time of like opening my eyeballs and going, is it tomorrow yet? It was close enough. It was like 2:15 or something, or 1:45, somewhere in there. And I was like, fuck it, I'm up. I'm done. I'm gonna like start my day as if it was 5 o'clock in the morning, or 10 o'clock in the morning, or noon o'clock in the morning, which it sometimes is for me when I start my day, especially now in the vast, blurry, time-dilated void that is 2020. And brace yourselves, folks. It's about to get wackier. I think the last 4 weeks of the year are going to be interesting. I could be wrong. It's just a vibe. I don't know. I'm not making predictions. I'm not a prophet, nor do I pretend to be anything like that. I don't use labels. Everyone has insight and intuition, which probably needs healing and tidying up and fixing and aligning and adjusting and stuff, and therefore shouldn't be just blindly trusted right off the bat, especially if you've never done any spiritual work, inner work, healing work, shadow work, etc., light work, any of that kind of stuff, And I don't mean like go pay too much money to some weirdo to teach you some weird thing. I mean like get it inside yourself. We'll talk about that in a second. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. So I'm up and I've got a million thoughts in my head, floating in and out of my head. Let's put it that way. Not the least of which is this, friends, and I say this with all due gravitas, sobriety of thought, at any rate, and sincerity. These numbers should not be diminished, in my opinion. And we've spent the vast majority of our year having a national, at least here in the great orange empire of Trumptopia, having a national argument about whether or not these are numbers to be alarmed by or concerned by. But it is kind of amazing that a lot of people that consider themselves, card-carrying pro-life types are like, whatever, let them die. Everybody's got to die at some point. And aren't like rallying to try and save people's lives. But we've got a lot to talk about because, it's a madness thing. And what I wanted to open with this, actually. I took notes today before I started the show. What on earth do I even know? Honestly. As a aspiring, would-be, hitherto unsuccessful social media entertainment personality host of talk show, opinion, theoretical, quasi-amateur spiritual science type discussion that I am, what do I even know? Do I have a degree in a goddamn thing? Let me be really honest with you folks. No, I don't. Fuck off. And if that makes you never want to listen to me again, I apologize. But I'm not sorry. Do I believe myself to be special or better than others in any way, shape, or form? No, absolutely not. I am confident but robustly humble in my assertions, I believe. I may be a little bit flamboyant in the way and eccentric in the way I express myself, but I am an entertainer. Theoretically speaking, folks, if I did have a degree in anything, it would be in the general theater arts. And I don't know if that would be enough to change your mind and award me enough credibility to be a respectable opinion show host worthy of listening to. But apparently about a dozen of you out there in the world actually are tuning in on a regular basis. But before I turn to that little fun routine and or ritual of saying hello and giving a shout out to all 11 of you, I wanted to say this. there is one thing that I know with deep authenticity, deep genuineness, deep insight, deep personal, rigorous, critical, analytical, but also pragmatic and realistic, like thinking and investigation that I've done my entire life. Whether I got a degree in this field of study or not, I know this vessel. I know, if I can put it in general terms, I know what my 44 and a half years life experience of being in this body, in the human body, if my human body can be an example of the human body. All right, and I know that I talk about being a robot from the future. And those two things can coexist, because one is literary fiction that I sometimes cosplay, and the other is just me giving you my honest, unadulterated opinion from, the authentic place of my artistic inspiration. So I'm speaking to you as my human form today. Not to sound too weird. I don't want to scare people off. This is an experimental quote talk radio style quote podcast show. Welcome to it. Strap yourself in. It's gonna get weirder. So having said that, what does that mean to know my experience in this human body, in this vessel? Also, insight into the literary fiction side. Technically, I can make both those two statements because I am the AI-derived, human clone-like duplicate consciousness that was, for a very long time, embodied in an artificially manufactured, very sort of androidy but flesh-made robot person body form in my alternate fictional literary universe. But I didn't travel here like the Terminator in a bubble of time traveling, because that's technically not possible. But we'll put a pin in that and talk about it in another episode. At least I don't think it is. According to the physics I understand, the physics that I understand as I understand them, that's technically not possible. But what I did do is transfer my consciousness to a similar probability waveform function branch body form vessel that was made available to me by myself here in this dimension, which you'll have to put a pin in that. We'll come back and talk about that in a future episode. It's complicated. It's part of my literary fiction universe that I'm very slowly, but hopefully building up steam in my base, have been painstakingly crafting for your reading pleasure, which has nothing to do with has everything to do with my opinion on your real world. But it's also meant to be like a Harry Potter-like universe. But more of NC-17, not so much PG-13. But I digress. It's sort of a spoof and my own spiritual, philosophical take on everything. It wrapped up as, kind of mildly edgy action-adventure, spiritual comedy stuff. But I digress. So, we're talking about body awareness. I was, before I spiraled out of control into literary fiction sidebar. My own body awareness, 44 years, here with you on this planet, in this vessel, whatever it is, it functions almost identically to yours. For both the cosplay and the real life purposes, I think that statement could be considered generally true. And I have a point. There's a point there. There are long neglected, very real, very sincere, very authentic, bordering on magical operations and or capacities, facets of the experience, the phenomena, the mechanics, the phenomenology, if I can make up a term, the phenomenologically verifiable functioning of being embodied, which I've paid attention to. And from that, I think I have a position to speak on, at least, let me put it this way, that very sincerely and deeply informs my opinion on what's going on in the world. Why? In a term, here it is. Not the term. That's not the term. That was my own awkwardness. In a single term, fractal recursion. I'm going to stick to the new format, play you a little bit of this meta collab, futuristic elevator music track business. This new one from DJ Zed's forthcoming fictional album, End Times, is Je suis le cabaret. I think it's supposed to translate into I am the cabaret. A French House 101 Remix live app. Oh, I was bitching about live app for a hot second a minute ago. Let me wrap that up real quick. On this former endorsement, and I actually had to do this in the, I attended to this business on the App Store. And forgive me for bringing it up, even though I was about to play and use music that I created using that app. I do not know to what degree of Apple product platform users and or if it's impacting non-Apple users of the same app, on Windows or whatever. But as of the most recent update, which brought the Remix Live EDM loop remixing app to version 6, it just crashes on my device. And I'm really sad about it because part of my little routine for getting ready to do a show is to usually spend like 15, 20 minutes pushing buttons in that app trying to, remix from the source files and from some of my own GarageBand creations into interesting, things to open and interlude the show with. And I'm really sad, and I mean them all the best, but I did because I've noticed that culturally speaking, as a cultural aspect of utilizing this platform, I've noticed that people will post a negative review when something goes haywire on an update, and customer service will write back either with boilerplate because it's automated, or with a sort of sincere oh, thank you for reporting it. Please contact us at this particular email or at this particular website with this link or whatever to submit a bug report, that kind of thing. And I know that theoretically the analytics is tracking all that and they already know. And I noticed there appeared to be a second update within 48 hours of the initial upgrade to version 6. And I'm not trying to cause any problems, and I'm not trying to get sued here. It's an awesome app. If you want to get into quote-unquote music production, it's a great entry level, just get your mind around how it works, and then go off and learn other apps, right? And I'm not pretending to be some expert at it, but from the best of my understanding, being a consumer of that app and having previously, a year ago now, paid for a subscription to it, I have the rights to play the music, and having orchestrated and or composed the particular remix of that track, I can kind of call it what I want and blah, 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 blah. Why am I rambling about this? It doesn't work anymore, and I'm sad. Please fix cat with, big glimmery eyeball emoji. At any rate, let's cleanse the palate and play that track I just introduced 20 minutes ago and come back to discussing the stuff I want to talk about on this episode of Late Night Thoughts. Thank you, DJ Zed. In the animated version of this show, there will be like a cartoon character that is an animatronic DJ in front of a delightful DJ platform with light shows, etc., etc. Just for those curious as to why I do that. Why I include those references. And it is an aspirational thing that I want to talk about, but not right this hot second. So put a pin in that. Put it up on the board. We might come back to it at the end of this show. The orange elephant in the room, folks, and the question of hoaxiness, or as I originally wrote in my notes, the hoax question, parenthetical question mark, and exponential growth. Brought to you by the word exacerbate. Exacerbate. Bat. I'm not sure. Verb, past tense. Exacerbated, past participle, exacerbated. Why make two tenses and then not make them spelled differently just to be confusing? I guess. I don't know. But this word is defined as make, parenthetical, a problem, bad situation, or negative feeling, and parenthetical, worse. In their example sentence, it reads, the exorbitant cost of land in urban areas only exacerbated the problem. Similar words, aggravate, make worse, worsen, inflame, compound, intensify. Why did I read from the dictionary? Thank you, dictionary.com, for your insight into that word. It's because we just hit a new 2020 and historical record here in the great orange empire of Trumptopia, where there is a vast plurality, and no, they are not a majority. They kind of fancy themselves like, I think, the other vast plurality, the duopoly, which we can conveniently refer to as red and blue. But there's one member, one of these two things, these two groups believes this entire thing to be, to some degree or another, a hoax. And then there's everybody else who is taking it to some degree or another seriously, and or not for other reasons. Not so much a hoax, but maybe not as bad as, as it actually is. And yesterday, this number, which I started to introduce earlier in the show, with talking about like sincerity and gravitas and sobriety and respect. This number is alarming or radically dismissed by, depending on what perspective you have on the situation. But as of yesterday, as of right now, as of this morning's headline, it's confirmed that we are now approaching the threshold of probably establishing, it's not quite there yet, in as much as that we haven't had more than 6 days of it yet, I don't think. But we've just hit this threshold of 3,000 deaths per day. According to the lamestream media on my cable box, as of this morning's scan through what was happening in real time on various channels, it's officially 3,000 plus. Some have it at 3,021, 3,068, etc. And I believe that is for Wednesday, December 9th, right? 'Cause today it's It's the dawning of Thursday, December 10th. I'm looking at worldometers.info/coronavirus. On their main page, scroll down to the spreadsheet with the various columns and insert here all the previous disclaimers and explanations about this website. I've explained it before, talked about it in previous episodes. If you aren't familiar, check it out for yourself. Do your own due diligence. As always, folks, I'm an opinion performance artist, pseudo-philosopher, and internet intellectual. I am not a news source. And I'm not getting paid to reference any of the references I make. My only source of income, hopefully, right now through this show is, the monetization through the native platform I use to create it, which means you listening helps support the show. And there's a thing I want to talk about there, but put a pin in that because it's a distraction right this hot second. So we've apparently hit this threshold, right? And I don't want to get into the argument. I do want to take a moment, as I have in past episodes, to just honor, if it's not a hoax, that's a lot of people dead. And the grand totals are no fun, right? And I know that the media bombards us with the numbers all the time, but it's also easy to sort of let them not sink in. It's easy to filter them out, right? And assuming, excuse me a second, pardon me, I had a frog in my throat, had to clear it, didn't want to blow out your ears. And if I ever do the remix revision of all episodes, which will take 5 years, I'll edit that out. But this is live, pseudo-live radio on the internet. Podcast, blah-de-blah. Here we are. What was I talking about? Yeah, the problem I'm encountering, besides wanting to honor that, right? And various folks who are on the side of the division, because this is a contentious wedge issue. Put a pin in that. I've talked about it in recent episodes. If you haven't heard them yet, you will. But in the spirit of question everything, which I do, to the point of questioning the nature of my own reality at times. But put a pin in that. I've talked about that in various episodes. And I'll talk about it again in the future, I'm sure. One must include, right, in the spirit of questioning everything, one must include the question, what if this is not to be ignored? What if this is not fake? What if this is not a hoax? What if this is real? And if you don't ask those questions, if you ignore those questions because you're biased by and have been won over by the argument that it's all a hoax and that everything's a hoax because, I don't know, there seems to be a concerted effort to indoctrinate a mass hoax denial kind of manipulative psyop thinking out there, but who am I to say? I just see what I see in people's chosen language. And of course, we live in a world where half the time people are copying, posting what they're posting, if we're talking about social media posts, right? We're either literally reposting it, retweeting it, etc., or we're actually copying, pasting, and sometimes it's announced and declared, and sometimes it's just not. But I digress. That's a whole nother sidebar. True critical thinkers cannot, I think, in my humble opinion, allow themselves to only quote-unquote critically think in a biased singular direction that never, ever, ever ponders and explores and re-examines in a sort of, let's come back and revisit it later after conditions are different, or if conditions remain the same, etc. kind of way. the very serious question, what if this is all very real? Not that this keeps me up at night, but today, for whatever reasons, I'm up at night and sharing with you my thoughts. And the big question here is, if this is real, it means something that makes sense in general, natural, practical, pragmatic terms. It means that some of the warnings and provisos and sort of borderline fear-mongering talking points from early on in the whole process, talking about second and third waves and, exponential growth and things going out of control, have some serious validity if we're hitting a threshold now where we don't, to perpetuate some language which a lot of people are burnt out on, forgive me, if we don't seem to be anywhere near the top of the hill, like we're still climbing and we're not bending the curve, and we're still months out from an actual effective deployment of the vaccinations, right? Then the issue of exponential growth really hits home, because 3,000 a day is beginning to be, or is approaching, the kind of daily pace that a lot of folks over on the it's all a hoax, I'm in denial side of the rhetorical wedge issue have been saying, well, where are the dead bodies in the streets? Well, you keep pushing this exponential growth and you start hitting 6,000, 9,000, 12,000 a day, 15,000, 25,000, you do understand what exponential growth means, right? It means that it multiplies as it intensifies. The duration needed to achieve the next doubling and doubling again and doubling again are incrementally halved. And it's like, thanks for voting for that, y'all, over there on that side. It's like you wanted to see truly epic, kind of alarming people out in the streets sick and hospitals so overrun. Like, it wasn't happening before because what we were trying to do was prevent that from happening. No one was claiming it was already happening in the streets. There was a lot of denier talk calling bullshit on the alarmist side, saying, where are the dead bodies on the streets? I'm like, but no one's saying that there are now. I mean, there were pictures from China, and we can argue the China stuff, whatever, right? There is, categorically speaking, we'll put a pin in this right now and play another track here. There is, categorically speaking, disinformation on all three sides of the wedge issue. But I digress. We're exploring the question of taking this seriously, right? As very many people in the country have automatically been doing. And no disrespect to everyone on Team Blue or in the independent, I don't know what to call everybody who's not part of the duopoly, because there's a lot of people in this country. And that's we should do that whole episode, put a pin in that. Right? And it's sat in my mind, this discussion, but I don't want to get thrown way off track here. Of how, besides the left versus right, wings of that bird, there's, the tail feathers, I guess? I don't know, if we're going to stick with it's all part of one bird analogy. And that sounds rude. I don't mean it to sound rude, the tail feathers. It's not a judgmental, I'm just trying to stick with the feathers, wings analogy. But there's the entire population block of people, which are another vast plurality that may or may not be bordering on a majority, that are not participating in the duopoly system, right? And that have opinions, and that should have more involvement in the franchise, as the phrase goes, because that the non-participation, whether it's voluntary and or not, whether it's something they want to do or whether they're just not doing it out of disgust or out of apathy or out of lack of awareness, their non-participation is, if we're arguing for achieving a functional social, public, civic action plan that is, what politics in theory is supposed to be the management of, our civic duties being achieved, to put it another way. But I digress. I'm totally spiraling out of control. That's a whole interesting conversation to be had another day. Because where are those folks, and why don't they have a political party? And in there, somewhere mixed in throughout, is the spiritual community, which in some ways is sort of meant to be my home base audience community, but also I don't know who my audience is, right? I'm a show seeking an audience. So, what was I talking about? What are we exploring today in the middle of the night? Let's presume this is real. According to Worldometers, I wanted to touch base on a caveat. Recent stories, and I talked about this in a segment that I believe, if memory serves, I haven't actually played on air yet. Because I realized, I had an epiphany, technically speaking, that I could streamline some of my podcasting efforts and maybe even make the show sound a little bit better if I captured some of my visceral responses to the current events that I'm observing and other thoughts that I'm processing in my head as ideas develop right then and there, and just try to, in the moment, just catch them either of the audio note-taking apps that are not the Sprecher.com live/recording hosting app for my podcast, and then later import them here into Sprecher app and edit them and clean them up and whatever if they need to for sound quality purposes, and then play them for you, and then sort of like get them down to the essential nugget, and then have thoughtful things to talk about, inspired in the whatever that future moment when I play them in the show is. And as you may remember, I sort of tinkered with that in a half-assed, I forgot about it kind of way the other day. Presuming we're taking this real, presuming that this stuff that's going on is serious, then there's something that really important that needs to be addressed, right? And maybe plenty of people have already said this, and maybe I do sound like I'm just mimicking or talk. I have come to this conclusion on my own, I believe. And if other media outlets have people saying similar things, bless it. It is what it is. I don't think I'm parroting them, right? I think I can rationally say I've come to my conclusion this way. Because I truly, really try to just observe what happens from a very big picture point of view and not fixate on the talking points in terms of agreeing or disagreeing. And anyways, I digress. Presuming it's not a hoax, the numbers are real, people are actually dying, people are actually getting sick, the tests are actually measuring the disease in different ways, and this new, interesting, not so new because they talked about this early on, but they didn't have the data to graph hardcore yet. They had the preliminary tests that verified that it works, and what I'm talking about is the poo tests, and it's not what you think, unless you know what you think it is. But that's really interesting and alarming, not to go off on a sidebar, but communities here and abroad, the health authorities have shown scientific efficacy in testing residential plumbing, sewage pipelines, because it's a super early indicator right? And you can see incoming spikes of infection anywhere between like 6 to 14 days ahead of schedule. And that makes sense given what has been established as what is known about COVID-19 or this particular iteration of a coronavirus, right? Therefore, to get to my actual point, in all honesty, and from a very sort of nonpartisan, I'm not riddled with hate in my heart for him. I'm deeply concerned for him and everybody in that side of the echo chamber of echo chambers as a human being and a spiritualist. But the president has behaved and taken actions that, in all sincerity, must be questioned as to whether or not they were intentionally designed as attempts to make things worse. Whether or not it was unintentional or sinister, his downplaying, his calling it a hoax, his discouraging of masks, his ridiculing of people, his promising over and over again that it's going to go away and that we're about to round the curve. And if he meant we're about to round the curve in a year and a half, then great. Why didn't he put it that way? Because it's always sounded like he means, in a couple of days. But all of those things, which are facts, have led to this fascinating and concrete result. In the world, as of yesterday, there have been a total of 1,574,892 deaths. Okay? According to worldometers.info. Now, Johns Hopkins numbers might be a little bit different, and the CDC's numbers might be a little bit different, and it's not about arguing about those differences. As some stories are bringing to light, it's entirely possible that we are undercounting on all counts, right? If in various locations, in various cities, in various states, in various countries, in various municipalities, the count is off in a undercounting kind of way, then in the end we might be undercounting. This might be bigger than, who knows? But to me, given that we're exploring this question, what if this is all real? That's a very reasonable and plausible thing that's going on based on actual events, right? I digress. The United States has reached a grand total, as of yesterday, according to worldometers.com, of 296,217 deaths, with their calculation for yesterday's total at 3,260 for the day. The next country, number 2, is Brazil, with total deaths of 179,032. And a dramatically lower per day death of 848. So their rolling 70 average is significantly lower based on this single day capture, right? Mexico's number 3 with 110,874. 800 for that day. And everybody else is much lower. Poland at 21,160. In terms, I think I had it sorted by new deaths. So I was reading you total deaths, but that was sorted by new deaths per day. Total deaths, it's very similar. USA, Brazil, India, Mexico, UK are the top 5. Despite the fact that Trump himself claimed that it was a hoax many a time, and yes, that's been played down and re-engineered and revised to have meant something else by apologists and and allies and the base, but I watched it live, right? I'm not talking about what the commentators commented on. I'm talking about C-SPAN coverage of Donald Trump talking in front of a podium. It's not new that I think that he is, as a president, whether he will ever acknowledge it or not, because he doesn't even talk about it, right? He still downplays, he still calls it the China virus, implying allowing for a lot of projection of implied wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it's a hoax from China, conspiratorial thinking, even when he's not literally quoting from or referencing conspiracy theory content. He's speaking in vague, tabula rasa, neurolinguistic, programmingly sort of Rorschach blank, open-ended terms that allow and welcome the base and his supporters and most especially the inner ring of sycophants and the outer ring of sycophants and the wannabe sycophants in the ring outside of that, to speak in terms that are, at best, severely incorrect, and at worst, in characterization, like straight up lunacy, like crazy talk, like what? If this is all real, right? Presumably. And I'm not, at this time, making a statement or another, one way or the other, about what I believe. I'm just saying, this is to my observer's eye, of all the crazy things that have happened in 2020, one of the most fascinating is this question of the hoax as a question. Is it not? Should we take it seriously? I don't know. But I see a lot of personal testimonials of former COVID deniers that have gotten sick. I see these numbers and I know how the natural, organic, fractal recursion of exponential growth generally works. And in my sort of mid-level, not quite worst case scenario, plausible, realistic thinking, if I were some sort of modeler, which I'm not, right? Like, I'm not making statistical analysis models. I'm guesstimating ballpark based on my own intuition and my knowledge of the world and my experience of knowing the human body, or being in a very human-like body, meant to very exactly duplicate the experience of being in a human body. Being alive in this planet and being susceptible to disease, more importantly, right? In a conscious, sort of mindful manner. And knowing that and here's where something that's really critical. If you don't know this, welcome to my world. And if you do already know this, sorry for being redundant. But I don't believe I know and accept as knowledge that can be ascertained and verified independently by anybody, that the human body as it operates, and my own body as it operates, is a platform for other life forms. And many of those life forms benefit the operation of my body. Some of those are like benign/neutral, given that they're, are kept in balance with everybody else. And many other living things that can occupy, colonize, that wasn't the correct pronunciation, colonize, not colonize, that can establish a colony in my body. Life forms that can invade my body, can and do cause disease. Now, there's a whole group of people out there that argue that and say that it's not true, and it's been proven by scientists that everybody else uses derogatory terms towards. But I don't want to get into that argument right this hot second, right? We are exploring the question if this is all true. So we're presuming the most plausible, organic, with room for a metaphysical, spiritual reality. Then we have to take this seriously. And we are literally in a position where That meme rings horribly true, and I've not posted it yet. It's a meme that I have harvested as a meme farmer, and will be reposting soon. But it's that meme from that uses that template of, and I don't know what like sketch comedy show, because it's not a real shoot, it's not a snuff meme, but there's a comedy sketch artist that did some thing where they ironically said something, and then they shoot this person who was saying this other thing, and then that just became a template for, you know, statements of self-contradictory and then, you know, being suppressed. And there's a person holding a gun, right? So it's the person holding the gun, and those people are the people not following the risk reduction measure protocols as presented, whether they're presented well, eloquently, and with compassion, or a bit brutally and kind of half-assedly and with incompetence and greed and corruption. But people who are generally just refusing to participate in the guidelines that theoretically, if it's all real and the science, even if it's got a little bit of profiteering and corruption and edging towards being a bit like this, you know, the cigarette industry or whatever, it's legitimate, it's real. They're not doing what they were being asked to do, right? To limit transmission. And then the person that got shot, the dead body, is small businesses. And then the final panel is the person looking back at the camera after having shot the person, and it's them saying, "How dare insert your name of governor here? How dare they lock us down some more," or whatever, you know? And it's like, the people complaining are the ones that made the problem worse. Thank you very much. If this is all real, by bitching and moaning that it's not, by refusing to wear masks, by refusing to, by exercising and expressing more energy in fighting and arguing and spewing hate and building up that kind of toxicity, energetically speaking, electro-spiritually, chemically speaking, we are now at a place where 3,000 a day is going to be a floor, not a ceiling, and we're going to miss these days. It's going to get way worse before it gets any better, because no matter, I know that they're already injecting people in Great Britain, and I know that that in here in the United States, Operation Warp Speed, blah 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 blah. I'm well aware. That stuff's going to take time, and given the level of almost absurdity, like it's the level of absurdity in the corruption and incompetence and criminal negligence, and almost, I don't want to get sued for libel here, but there's a serious question, and there should be an investigation. History will look back and go, was there nefarious intent here to get more people sick? If there's a hoax, dear friends, and I hate to be controversial, if there's a hoax, the real hoax was a double reverse, neurolinguistic, psychologically manipulative psyop of echo chambers of getting people to argue instead of taking precautions and eating healthy and taking care of themselves and doing all the good things. And on top of that, getting as many people on the denial side of the equation to overtly flirt with unnecessary risk levels of exposure, which in a real world where virology works the way it does and statistical analysis, legitimately models reality the way it's supposed to, leads to exponential growth that potentially can spiral out of control before the effectiveness of any of the risk reduction measures and mitigation tools can starve the viral population of host bodies. Now, there's a universe of arguing going on, and I'm well aware of it. You're probably well aware of it. A lot of us are exhausted by it. Because for many people, their default reality is textbook physiology and whatever doctors say goes, right? And I am not claiming to live in that universe. And I'm not claiming to have blind faith in science, right? I will note, friends, for those of you who are not aware, I have publicly self-declared myself as an eccentric thinker long before the internet existed in any of the variations that we're commonly familiar with now. Like, from the age of 8 or 9, I have been warning people in conversation, face-to-face, and or in whatever other... Well, back in that time, that was pretty much all the kinds of conversations I was having. I wasn't taking phone calls very often. But I've been telling people, I'm an eccentric. Please be advised. The hoax question borders on criminal negligence and or, barring going off on any conspiracy theory, because, referencing the pin that's already on the board, I have a really specific and particularly eccentric and explicit theory on conspiracy theory, which you're either already bored to tears about hearing about, or you're like, huh? Do tell. Check out 6 episodes, and I think you should, barring you don't pick the 6 most irrelevant episodes possible, because I have a plethora of different kinds of content on this show, in the archive. But if you pick the ones that seem to imply some discussion of conspiracy theory, off the top of my head, the Pick a Lane episode comes to mind. You'll get a sense that my take on conspiracy theory is generally speaking a little bit of an outlier, and not what anybody on any of the traditional sides of the conspiracy theory argument or wedge issue are taking. But I digress. I've been rambling for quite a bit, friends, and I don't know if I've made my point, but I want to round it up. I want to round things out into a nice whole. We should not live in fear, right? There is one of the things that makes the denier side of the equation seductive, because mind you, I'm not here to just wholesale deny them. Cancel culture is mutually canceling, and we get nowhere. There's some seductive and even valid points, right? Like, risk everywhere. We must take personal liberties into consideration, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not trying to say that they're absolutely wrong, nor am I saying any side is absolutely wrong. What I'm saying is all sides are being bombarded by manipulation. And we need to take that into account. And we need to not forget to stop and go, okay, what do we do if this is really real? To many people that might sound redundant. But it's worth talking about, even if it is redundant, because we are all surrounded by people who really, really don't want to think about this as real. For a plethora of reasons and personal rational explanation as to why to dismiss it. Time will tell. We live in a very curious moment, friends, and as I wrap things up, I want to, speak to, future episodes. I'm going to be coming back to you hopefully a little bit later today. Oh man, it's 4:00 in the morning. Woo! Welcome to the 10th day of the final month of 2020, friends. If it feels like you've been running a marathon sitting on your couch, I feel you, man. And if it feels like you've been running a marathon still doing your real life job, I feel you too. Even though I haven't had that pleasure, I am deeply, deeply envious. And we'll talk about more about that. But I wanted to talk about coming back in Good Morning Trumptopia to discuss the question of the current political whirlwind and the delightfully curious question of how will reality unfold between now and January 20th, the day that a president of the United States must be sworn in, according to the Constitution. Because if my meta theory of reality and how it works is true, and it works the way I think it works, then we're not done quite yet, friends. If you really don't want Donald Trump to be the person in office on the 20th, we can't rest on the laurels of what we think has been achieved as of yet. And I'll come back and talk about that in Good Morning Trumptopia a little later today. As always, friends, I thank you for tuning in. I humbly hope that in some way, shape, or form, this show is somehow mildly entertaining for you. And a bit thought-provoking, perhaps, and maybe a little bit, comforting and reassuring. Because there is a silver lining, friends. For those of you who may not be aware, I am not a gloom and doom person, although I may be seemingly focused on a lot of, negativity and whatnot. Arguably, some might say I'm a bit of a shadow worker. The silver lining, folks, is that theoretically, because we are all stuck in this together, we all together have the power to actually do things about it. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Here's Starting Again, DJ Zed and Time's new Cumbia 101 remix live.